In this video, we're going to take a look at a way we can efficiently get an army of Adeptus Custodes painted, but still have them looking really cool and emulating the art. If we take a look at the artwork, to me there's three things that stand out: the gold armour, the red plume, and the blue power weapons. So these are what I'm going to focus on getting looking how I want, with the gold being the primary focus. To start with, I want a really nice warm brown metallic base coat. So to create this, I've used Scale 75 Decayed Metal and GW Goregrunta Fur contrast paint. And this is 6 drops of the Decayed Metal to 1 drop of the Goregrunta. I'm using this in a really similar way that you could use in ink. And I've thinned this ever so slightly. It's already a pretty thin mixture just to get it going through the airbrush. It's going to take about 2 coats. You can see on the front, this is the second pass. It's what we're looking for. Then our first highlight, Scale 75 Dwarven Gold. I'm just picking my light source, in this case the right hand side. I thinned it ever so slightly. These scale metals go through the airbrush really nicely with very little thinning. You can see already we're getting a really nice gold colour. Push it a little further, I'm going to do a final airbrush highlight with Scale 75 Elven Gold. Not too much of this at all, maybe just hitting the top 20% or so of the highlights. I want to keep that Dwarven Gold as the primary colour. To add a little bit more interest into the gold, I'm going to spray the shadows using GW Druchii Violet. You can see we've already got a nice change from light to dark, and this is just to add a little more contrast. We don't need to go crazy with the contrast, it's just enough to be interesting. We don't want it to be distracting, multicoloured. As you can see, I'm just turning the model so I can really only hit the most deep shadows and the areas that I've already decided aren't going to get as much light. And just 1 coat of this is plenty. You can see once it's dried, just gives us a little bit more interest. Metals are one of those things that really do look so much better in the hand and on the table. But you can even see in the video, we've got some really nice variety of tones here. Now I hit the whole model with a couple of coats of Vallejo polyurethane gloss varnish. This is thinned, probably 2 drops of thinner to 1 drop of varnish. I give the model a good couple of coats in preparation for the next stage. Let's make up an oil wash. Now in this case, I've chosen burnt umber specifically because of the colour. It's sort of a red brown. Often I'll use this as my generic dirt pin wash, but in this case it was chosen very deliberately for the colour. And I'm thinning it down using SANSADOR thinner. The wash is a little bit thin there, so I add a touch more paint. Get it to where I want it. Now we'll pin wash the model with this mix. You can check out our other video to do with panel lining or pin washing and the different products you can use. If you don't fancy using oil for this, to be honest, Goregrunta Fur would probably work quite well. I'd still be thinning it though. And the reason I'm working with the oils, it's my favourite thing to pin wash with, and the colour's right. I'm not particularly interested in the finish of the oil paint in this case. I'm going to alter that using my varnish in a minute. I did 2 coats of this pin wash, not all over the model, but on areas where I really wanted to create plenty of definition. And it looks a bit sloppy on that shoulder pad, but if you tidy it up with your brush as you go, always drawing the brush towards the shadows, you'll wick up that extra paint and it'll be fine. Here it is dried off. Now a few of you have asked how long do we leave the oil paints. When I'm filming, I do the wash, I leave it about 15 minutes and then I get a hairdryer on it and then I continue. If I was doing this on my own for my own army, I tend to do all the oil washes in an evening and then leave it overnight and come back to it the following evening and continue working. To make sure I've got that same finish on all the parts of my paint, I'm going to give the model a satin varnish, in this case a 6:1 mix of gloss to matte. I'm going to start picking up some pre-mixed satins now there's a lot more available and see what they're like. The final bit of work on the gold is some highlighting. For this I'm using scale 75 Citrine Alchemy. I've never really been a fan of highlighting golds with silvers, so I'm going to use this colour instead. It's not the best paint for edge highlighting because it's not that thick, so you might need to do a couple of applications. But it is this really nice super light sort of metallic yellow colour. And you might choose to just focus this on the head and top of the model, but I chose to do it on all of this lovely filigree that they've moulded onto the model. It seemed to make sense. I've blacked out all the other parts on the model now with Vallejo Model Colour Black. I'm going to apply a first highlight, this time using Vallejo Model Colour Dark Grey. I'm doing this on all the connective bits of material and any little bits of black leather or whatever there might be on the model. To be honest, he's almost entirely gold, so there's not too much at this stage. You can see the difference just already having a non-metallic finish on the model somewhere has made to how impactful that gold looks. And to highlight this further, I'm going to use Vallejo Model Colour French Mirage Blue. For the other leather parts of the model that are sort of a purpley red colour, I base coated them using GW Barak Nar Burgundy. I'm then going to give them a wash of scale 75 black leather. I actually added a drop of black to this as well, just to make it a little darker, so it would create a bit more definition on certain areas. And then a highlight using scale 75 orange leather. And for this, I'm just sort of edge highlighting and adding the odd little scratch. What I particularly like about these paints is they have a very matte finish, which again gives us a different type of contrast on the model. For the plume, I've chosen to base coat it using Vallejo Model Colour Ivory. It's taken about 3 thin coats, but I know I can get a really smooth finish with this paint. And when we're painting red, we always want a really nice bright base coat to work off. And to get a super bright red, I've decided to use GW Blood Angels Red contrast paint. Now I've thinned this using a little bit of the contrast medium, and it's taken me 3 coats to get the effect that I want. I'm a big fan of using contrast paints for this sort of job, so when I'm painting the plumes on helmets or the manes and the tails on horses, that type of thing, it's a really quick and easy way to do it, and you get a really nice result. One thing I'm not a huge fan of is the finish of contrast paints, so I've given the whole plume a coat of AK Interactive ULTRAMATTE varnish just to change this a little bit. I haven't thinned it or anything, it's already super thin because it goes in the airbrush. For all the gems and the lenses, and the sword in fact, I'm going to use the same recipe just to keep this army painting technique quicker. So I base coat in GW Incubi Darkness. Then our first highlight is GW Sotek Green, and on the gems you just follow the shape of the gem, so in this case a sort of half oval as it were in the bottom left. I then highlight again with a brighter blue, in this case P3 Arcane Blue, just a slightly smaller half circle. Just to add a little bit more, I give it one more highlight with a little bit of white mixed into the Arcane Blue. Lastly, we have a incredibly out of focus white dot. And I've done this for all the gems on the model. For the silver metal parts, I want to keep this as simple as possible, so I've chosen a dark silver colour, in this case GW Iron Warriors. If you don't have a particularly dark silver, you can always just add a drop of black into a silver that you have got. I've tried to copy the artwork here and have as much of the model gold as possible. but I felt like it needed a little bit of silver here and there. To highlight this, I'm going to use Vallejo Model Air Steel. Just going to hit those sharpest edges. The model's already very reflective because of the gold, so we don't need to go crazy with this. I've painted the power blade in exactly the same technique as we show in our video for painting power weapons, but I thought I'd show you quickly the process of applying the colours. So I base coat using the Incubi Darkness, then Sotek Green all over. The Incubi Darkness was just to help this cover slightly better. Quick bit of hairdryer, and another layer of the Sotek. Then, just like the gems, I put my first highlight on using Arcane Blue. Hairdryer again. A bit more of the Arcane Blue. And I've added a little bit of white again. Pop those final highlights in. Now I introduce the shadows using Incubi Darkness again. And I begin the blending process now, glazing in Sotek Green. As I say, if you check out our video on power weapons, you can see how to do this. And that's the model all done. Thankfully the gold takes up such a huge area. If we focus on getting that right, that's the vast majority of the work done for us. Whilst I've used the airbrush in this piece, you don't need to, but I think it's a great example of how much it saved us time and allowed us to go on and spend a little bit of extra time making those gems look really nice, making the leather look quite interesting. When you have such a limited amount of colours on the model, there's lots of challenges for ways that you can get interest or contrast into it. As I said earlier, I didn't want to go over the top on the gold and start playing around with tons of different colours, but I think you'll agree it's a warm gold, but it's got lots of nice variations in tone across it. The red plume certainly pops, and the blue power weapon. So if we go back to the artwork, I think we've achieved what we set out to do. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on how to paint predominantly a gold scheme. You can see how maybe you can use this recipe, or some of the ideas at least, in your own hobby projects. If you have enjoyed the video, hit the like button. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. Makes a big difference to us. And I'll see you next time.